Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin, and the topic is the African Americans and the United States Supreme Court. Dr. Baldwin, let's continue our discussion in reference to the African American and the court and some of the things that you believe to be important in terms of where we go from here.
Yes. I think one of the things, of course, we have to be concerned about is that we are moved completely from race, considerations based on race, to a system of merit-based admissions in colleges and universities, for an example, when you talk about affirmative action. Unfortunately, we don't have a Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court anymore. We don't have a Thurgood Marshall. We have Clarence Thomas, we have John Roberts, we have several other people on the Supreme Court who tend to lean toward the extreme right. And of course, we only have Alana Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the more liberal side, who tend to decide in favor of what? Decisions that benefit people of color and women. So what we have to be concerned about is what will happen to affirmative action. Now, in the past, the Supreme Court has deferred to corporations and universities, other institutions, to make their own decisions about how they plan to pursue diversity. I don't know if that will happen in the future. With the recent confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, and as you well know, there was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of tension surrounding his nomination and confirmation to the Supreme Court. The fear we have now is that affirmative action will eventually be eliminated. And nothing worse could happen to African Americans, people of color, and even women.
That's right.
Because women have benefited from affirmative action, and that's often overlooked. The extent to which white women, black women, women in general have benefited from affirmative action. So the question is, where will the Supreme Court go from here? What impact can we have on the kind of decision-making that comes out of the court? Now, we know that that it's a predominantly what? Republican court. Now, we have to call it what it is.
Been. That's right, it is now.
We have to call it what it is. The only question we have now is, how can we assure that the future of this nation is developed around this need to really include people.
Okay, very good.
To be inclusive, to make sure that all people enjoy the fullness of equality and their rights. Women, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans. I think that's very important as we look to the future in terms of what happens between not only African Americans in the Supreme Court, but minorities in general.
Well, everything since the Brown decision, dealing with race is at stake in a real sense, and what we have to do. And the only way I see us getting around this situation, Dr. Baldwin, is through the suffrage. That's about the only way. I mean, I don't see any kind of laws that might be, or any kind of decisions that this court would be willing to issue that would bring back affirmative action, that would do something in terms of elevating the African American. I don't see that in this court. And
it's a court that is designed to turn back the clock. And as we look to the future, we need to press forward. As Dr. King and other civil rights leaders always said, that the goal is always to press forward and to design ways in which one can move the nation forward in terms of respect for diversity, in terms of inclusiveness, and we can't do that any other way than through the ballot.
That's the only way. I mean, that's the most important thing that we have going for us. It has always been, but quite recently there seems to be a tendency on the part of some of us to simply not vote and to simply give up voting.
That's unfortunate, but we are hoping that the 2018 midterms will be different. That people have gotten to the point where they realize that we're moving back instead of forward, and they will come out and vote. because the makeup of the Supreme Court is just as important as the makeup of the Senate and the House of Representatives and the executive branch. A lot of people don't pay attention to the Supreme Court, but those on the right did, and that's why Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed.
That's right.
Because they are expecting him to be a force in striking down affirmative action, in striking down the right of a woman to choose, in undermining the reproductive rights of women, in supporting those who are into gun advocacy, and those who are opposed to immigration, which brings in more people of color. So the right, I think, understands the extreme right, what's going on.
That's right.
But the important thing is that those of us who are not on the extreme right, those of us who support democratic policies, more liberal policies, more inclusive policies, have to get involved through the ballot.
And there's no other way.
No other way.
There's no other way that, as a matter of fact, I think it's constructed, and that's why the vote is important. And what we have to do is to make every person, not only Africans, because black, white, or whatever, make every person understand how important the suffrage is. That's the most important thing in a democracy.
That's right.
That's what a democracy is all about, isn't it?
That's right. You lose democracy if you don't vote. Your voice is not represented. You know, the gains that